Are we on? Okay. Um, it's so hard to be talking to myself. So I assume people are on. Um, you got a little note that I lost my notes. Now you know something more about me. Pretty dysfunctional. Um, Me running around for them, Sam looking around for them. Uh, so check things are working. Um, Part of the dysfunction, if you'll allow me, was making the mistake of reading the newspaper today and then having to follow up by talking about myself. If you read the newspaper today, of course, it's filled with the stories about uh, Israel and Gaza, stories about the people who were life taken on October 6th, profiles, and then a resumption of bombing in Gaza. And it reduces you into this feeling of, I guess you would say, near hopelessness. Plus the politics of our time, which can also render you a little bit feeling a little bit hopeless, um, not knowing where we're going, feeling like they say that our democratic values are being lost. If we ever really had them, now we're starting to question whether we really our democratic values are roots or a guise for what our country is doing in other places. I was reading that we have military in 85 countries now. That's not what this is about. So pardon me, I'm just talking about waking up to a moment of confusion. And then Janine said to me, I think Janine was saying, "Do you have any notes?" And I said, "No, I don't have any notes." I felt cool about them and embraced and wrote a series of notes. That's the way I am at the very last minute. Um, and the notes are, I'll put a picture up for you. The notes are questions, and they're questions that you'll be asking me, but I thought I'd ask myself because they're the questions now that have determined the book that a lot of you help support. The questions that I have wrote down here, they may not make any sense. Like, you know, how can you portray a poor person, person of color, person identified sexually different than yourself, uh, person who lives in a very different place, person who's born in a different culture? How can you do that? Another note that's very coming out now more and more in articles, one of the people who received the Genius Grant made the remark that we, you, I am an outsider, somehow exploitative and aware by taking. The next thing is a statement, which is, I think, profound. You need to make room for women, people of color who have been maligned. Certainly true. So that's on my mind as well. You know, am I taking up space? I'm an old guy. And I keep working. Someone wrote me a note saying, "Why do you keep doing this stuff? Other people need to be doing this stuff." Absolutely correct. But that's what my life is about. Do you pay people? That's a question you might want to ask me. I won't go into it. No, I don't. But do you pose people? What is a collaborative photograph? Another question that's constantly asked me are pictures the truth? Are they fictions? Are they facts? Are they feelings? Another question you might want to ask me. I turn the page. Is photojournalism valid today? Another question that's rolling around in my head. Uh, how can you possibly keep looking at the terrible things you look at? Another thing that rolls in my head. Uh, why isn't photojournalism considered an art? Because it isn't. Are you out of date? And a lot of people say, what do you find when you go? So these are the kind of questions that are rolling around in my head. And I bring them up because they very much influence uh, in this brief life, the book thing. To explain that, permit me to show you a work that is not brief life. It was a book called The Day I Was Born. And that came up, really the last assignment I was, I think, quite a while ago for the New York Times. And I had this great assignment, which I self promoted this, and it's to go down in Arkansas and look at the town of rural Arkansas, where the reason I wanted to do this, let me explain again, is the Black Lives Matter movement was going. Uh, things were turning toward the courage of the Black community, the people standing up at last about discrimination, the history of slavery, etc. So in your own way, you want to make a donation. So you go down to Arkansas, where this town was a little 1970, a riot, not a riot, they called it the Earl Race Riot. It was actually 25 people did a peaceful march, and the white community came out and shot 2 women and beat everybody up. So I was down there to do the interviews with everybody, and I did. And I made a series of photographs. And what happened was, I brought them back. Actually, my wife Janine was with me. We went to the editors, showed them the work, made it very clear that the voices, everything in there, the voices were. This is a person in the book, a working guy whose life changed. This man at one time was a lawyer, became a field laborer. This is Jackie Greer, who was one of the women who was beaten during the Earl Race riot. Just gorgeous woman. I mean, we wouldn't go into it. She's become a very good friend. Um, Brought back the story, told everybody what it was about, including the fact that the artist that we mentioned, and if you did these paintings on this wall, happened to be a profoundly, overtly gay man with the courage to walk around town wearing a dress in this little conservative town. I think Timothy, all these elements, talked at the with not a word, with not a word. So, and months later, we never heard from them. I tried to say, well, they hated the work. Clearly, they hated the work. What was it? And I finally came to the conclusion, right or wrong, that I was the wrong person who's done this story. That is a story that has to be done, but I was the wrong one to do it. Yeah, I'm so glad that I did do it because um, that's Timothy Way's painting. It's been up hanging. It's a Black Jesus. It's been hanging on the wall of that store now for 20 years. This is Miss Maples. And the reason I'm glad I've done this story is Miss Maple has passed away. Miss Maples was a matriarch of incredible. Um, I was almost the same age as her, but she was like my mother because she was so superior in drive and intelligence. And she raised all these kids in a town where education is not important. She raised them all. They joined the military. They became school teachers. Incredible in this town. And she marched, got shot in the back, almost killed during that march. And then I met another woman named Sandra Gray, who drives me crazy. I love Sandra. She drives me every calls me every week. We sort of laugh about Sandra. But Sandra is one of these people who took on a role in life is to tend to the dying, not being paid for it. That she tends to people who are passing away because they don't want to die alone. And this is what she does. Anyway, no response from the story. So you step forward. What am I going to do? I didn't know what to do. We came through our own boarding like everybody did. I got sick. I got COVID. I didn't know what to do. I went out and began to photograph in close by Greenwood Cemetery just to keep alive because I knew I couldn't get any assignments anymore being an old guy and who it was. So I started photographing in Greenwood Cemetery, following Janine over there. She basically told me to get up off my ass and try to better your health, which was in terrible shape. But all this time now, I'm full of grudges and unhappy because I'm feeling like so much of my career is over. And I expressed this to Sam. And Sam, in his wisdom, said, he would never say that to me. I might say it to him because Dad, shut up, shut up, Dad. But what he really meant was do something about it. And he says, let's start posting pictures on Instagram. So I'm simultaneously going to the cemetery to stay alive as a photographer. I began to look through my contact books. And I would love to be able to say that projects like books start out of a great sense of discovery and wonder. Sometimes they come out of gloom. And because of Sam saying to me, show this work. And what happened on Instagram, which I was not a great fan of, people wrote us back. A lot of you have probably supported me. Instagram, and they wrote back saying, tell me about the people. Tell me who's out there. They didn't say necessarily great or Apple. They did that. They wanted to know more about the people. And that lifted me up and said there has to be a book there. So that became the foundation of this book. It came out of, trying to pull your head out of your own butt. So these are the this is Janine over there. They're telling me to shape up my language. But this is the wonders of beauty of the cemetery of Greenwood. The irony of this is I didn't want never thought about Greenwood, and I ended up showing this to a publisher, and this was gonna be a book. The Innisfree Fight was gonna be a book, but they wanted this book, so it's gonna be a book coming out in the springtime for Greenwood. Um, but it is a spectacularly pretty place, and it set the stage also for me with this constant thing. What about being 80 years old? Is you're also besieged with images of loss, of change, of inabilities, of strengths. You're supposed to be growing much wiser when you get older, but all I do seem to be is losing brain cells, and that's what most of us seem to be about, losing our memories and thoughts. So how do you keep going? And you have to keep going. If this is your role in life, some people say retirement's good, some people can't retire. Um, so things that happened uh, that got this book going. The things that prompted me was Sam. The thing that prompted me was having a person in my life like Janine, and I say that because Janine is a pretty no-nonsense person, so as I was going through all these contact books, so you can really love yourself if you're not too careful. You look at that, look at that. You show the work that you need. Sam, what Sam does for me when he's critical, he says nothing. He just keeps quiet, and that's not nonsense. Janine goes a little further. She says no. And her idea of criticism, yes and no. And she's almost always right. But I went through book after book, media contact books, finding all kinds of issues. Still didn't know what to do. Ended up getting a call from a friend, Jonathan Klein, who wanted to look at the book. He came back with some suggestions, which I thought were great. Is he said, "I want text because I don't want to write text. Everybody sees, this is a visual book. I don't want to write text." So I started writing text, which is at the end of the book. And then a friend, Lori Barrow, who's a designer friend from me in California, came up and said, you might want to mix in vignettes about a few things. You get bits and pieces from friends if you're lucky to have friends like that. People without ego who just simply saying, look, I don't care, but this is an idea. And so I wasn't totally alone in the book, is what I'm trying to say. Um, but for the pictures now, if you have any questions as we're going along, please throw them up. But I can tell you how the process began. And it began, it's more or less roughly chronological, as you probably know if you have the book or not. Um, and it began when I was a Vista volunteer in Arkansas. And for about a year, I was a Vista a little over a year. And I was a social worker going out in this particular family, trying to bring help to kids who were ill in the family. And I met this preacher. I began the book with him because this is a collaborative portrait in the sense that he asked me to take a picture. He wanted a picture of himself to hang in the church. I understand what the church was. It was a shotgun shack that he made into a church. And he was a self-made preacher, an extremely poor. And he wanted a picture. He said that immortalized him. And that was the word to use as you read the book. And he didn't mean immortalized the way we, Napoleon is immortalized. He meant that people wouldn't even know he existed because they no one knew he existed. And that's one of the things about the work that some of us do. And these are people we, at least for a moment, give them some credibility. For this is Reverend Landers and his two daughters, who, after this happened, I got to say, I mean, these kids were so photographable. They didn't give a shit. They were all jumping around in the yard, playing with that doll's head, getting all dirty in their clothes. They were just gorgeous children, not altogether stable children. It was a different household. And they had a very troubled brother who I didn't photograph. This is the kind of uh, photograph that I was probably doing because we were beginning to try to raise money for poverty programs down in the South. So chances are I made this photograph with the idea of fundraising in a small service organization. So it shows the kind of housing that people and a little bit of the field. Now people say one of the questions, how do you get inside people's lives? And I can hear some criticism now. You bet I was different than the people who came up there. I came from Boston, not from a wealthy family. My dad was a shipyard worker, my mother worked cleaning houses, but we lived comfortably in a sense, we had very well up to house. It's ramshackle, full of holes, broken windows, junk cars everywhere. Um, and it's very easy, if you're not careful, to make, quote, poverty pictures. And even back then, I made them because I needed to raise money, and they embarrassed me. They embarrassed me because they didn't reveal who the people were, and that came with time. And I think someday we'll do a workshop, like to say about time, that you got to take time, let people come to you in a sense. Later on, if I have time, I'll read you an essay that I read about loneliness of photographer, how in order to be a social photographer, you have to erase yourself. And it's hard for many of us to do. But you have to do your best to erase your personality, your biases, your impulses. Lots of people. When I was done, Arkansas lasted a couple of years. Our organization, the little newspaper, went broke finally. There was some violence and sent me home, not wholly well, and I went home to a girlfriend, Dorothea, and we joined together in Massachusetts, where I was born. I did, from the age of 10 or 11, my family brought us outside of Dorchester to Quincy. We came back. It was home to both of us. There's a little girl lived downstairs from us. Didn't she look cute here? She was a beast, and a very tough little girl. Um, now, why did I miss this picture? Because I was trying to get a picture that was full of irony. And the little boys are looking at her in the other picture. She looked kind of green, and I missed the fact that we have a kind of judgment, and it fits me very much the time we're living in. These little girls are coming by, and look at the judgment. Beautiful girl in the middle. Like, you got to be kidding, with her socks on and so forth. And they're both all dressed, but she was like a vision from the past. And the little boys around there were all chuckling about Patricia too, because Patricia wasn't being. Rita, a sorry little belly here from too many pregnancies. I think she had maybe a dozen kids. Um, Indian, Barrow, and started talking and invited me home. That's the process, and that's her youngest baby. And she always made the remark that she only had known better, she never would have had more kids, because she was a difficult child, but she was a rough woman. I grew to love her, actually, hearing stories about one day a man came into her and goes, hit on her very badly, touched her inappropriately, is the term today. He just punched her until one punch he was unconscious, because she had fists like twice the size of my hands, and she worked hard her whole life, so she wasn't the person. Um, and the Puerto Rican community was our astounding community to be a part of, in a sense. A part of it, they made many friends, uh, and they were open, amazingly open. Um, there was a lot of violence in the community. There were a lot of questions that we talk about in working communities. One of the things that I always had to worry about, a male going into a house where mostly were women, and it was a fine line of, not crossing. You had to be very careful. Very physical people, so you didn't want to get caught hugging, mom. Um, but the kids loved the attention. This is Iris, who I've got other pictures of Iris. Iris was gorgeous, and she knew she was gorgeous. So, she always wanted to send pictures, and then her little niece came on and scared to death. That's how it happens. But it comes after just hanging out. It was the nicest time. Once I got to know people, I could just, walk in. Here's a case in point where you just don't walk into a house. You be very careful, and you watch the time and make sure that people are not uncomfortable with you there. And there's a lot of question today about abuse of people, children. I wouldn't want to think about what would happen if you ever approached one of these children in a negative manner. It probably wouldn't be long for the planet. This is the same little girl in the other picture. I didn't know it. It's one of the things about photography. Uh, and being a photographer, I make a point, uh, good or bad, of trying to be rather ignorant when I go into somebody's home. Ignorant meaning that I try to get rid of my misconceptions of what I think about people. Um, try to be as open as possible. I didn't know until I took this picture of this little girl was an epileptic child, and she had just finished having a seizure and laying there kind of quiet, and that's how the picture happened. I said, ask the mom, it was okay. And of course, he's such a beautiful child. But every picture has another layer of stories. Maybe you don't need to know that. Maybe you just have to know that. But somehow the idea that she's a disruptive child and yet the toys are disruptive makes sense to me. But I didn't know that when we took the picture. Little George, people say they like little pictures. Little George was Dorothea. My first wife, Dorothea, the girlfriend, did a story called Short People Got Guns about Little George because Little George was part of a dwarf family that was very abused for their size where they lived. Would tip George's father over and some money would come out of his pockets. Um, George one day went out and bought a handgun to protect himself. And the first day he went out, he waved to the cop and his shirt pulled up and here's the gun. He gets charged, goes to court. Um, and the judge there, I always laugh at the story. It's really true. The judge came out to try his trial, and I think she was like 4'11" black woman, and she said that she herself knew about discrimination, and she just let him go. You know, let's see. We just had a surprise. We got Hi Eugene, I think Kickstarter funds 2 months ago. Susan.
Oh, it's a skills one.
Oh, skills mom. Well, we don't know what happened.
I shipped the book to her. Is that?
Yeah, she's asking.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, we'll talk to you later, but I think the book has been shipped to you if it's missing. Yeah. Another person wrote out, my old friend Marcus. We've had some nice times together. Just like to hear these stories. I hope so, Marcus. I'm probably going to bore you. You know most of it. So I'll go on from you. This is a story that never ran. Most of these stories never ran in the news magazines they were meant for. This is out in Lima State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. And I thought it was an incredible place in the sense that, how to describe it to you. I walked in, this is where I got complete access to people and the crimes that they committed. Many of them were very minor. People were in there for all kinds of things, super major, terrible crimes. A young woman killed both their parents with a hammer. People I got to know really well, on and on. But no one cared about the story back then, because I was mostly interested in what brought the people to this place and how they could be now so gentle. Is it medicines? Is it the life they lead? But Jerry here is one of these people who never wanted to be let go. He says, I have to stay in this institution because I'll commit them. On the outside, I can't stop myself. And he was one of people who attracted kids. He was the nicest man imaginable. He raised rabbits, etc. It's hard people to understand the passions of, people who I think who have food addictions, people who have alcohol addictions, people who have sexual addictions. You can be judgmental, but you can't always understand what drives people and possesses them. And I'm open, though, I'm glad that maybe they didn't get out, but it's a tragedy that you can't live in normal life. It's another woman, young woman in the same institution. I wasn't a conflict photographer. Later on, I did work you could say as conflict work, but this is in Beirut. This is my first time ever out of the country, actually, and ended up in a kind of difficult war zone. But I won't dwell on this as the issue. The Israelis were shelling this heavily, and these are the kids. Now we see these all the time, right? pictures coming out of remind me of the wars of early kids, I think, about beheadings, but then many, many kids in institutions in Gaza um, being moved around from respirator to respirator, and broken down walls. And these were the kids nobody wanted coming in the basement of a psychiatric hospital that had been hit by Israeli gunfire. It's like this kind of photograph is, to me, is difficult to make. It's difficult to justify um, because it has political implications, perhaps, to some people. But it's what your job is. The job is to do your job, and then you know will pay some attention and work it out amongst themselves. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to back away to see what the response is. I went begin up as lost there, and you know, met Janine, and this is our first project together. This is the book that I would like to do today again, but I can't possibly. But a book called Below the Line, which is about living poor in America, which a lot of people are doing today, despite the so-called economy. But this is in the mountains of Kentucky, Tennessee border. And I could go on and on about this family. How you meet people. Janine gave me the name of Letta Casey here. She was a spokesperson in Congress about poverty up there, and I went up to see them. And one of the most embarrassing times, which I've had a lot of them, where people is that when I got there, they got on she brought out the whole family of 8 or 9 people, and they pictures. And I had to persuade him that I come back. Days later, it took me days to get to know his family. After a week, I didn't want to. Best time. One of the pictures I made was this is a frame I've shown before of the kid laying on the front of the car, and this is JJ, his name, looking in at me. One of the kids fell asleep a little behind the wheel. It was one of those hot days. And it's when you really love being a photographer because the kids didn't give up about the camera, didn't care at all. This housing project in Chicago. These are the kind of difficult stories to tell because there's a lot of discussion now about age of consent. It varies and varies, and you try not to be judgmental. This is an incredibly nice young woman who was pregnant at the age of 12. Her sister actually had 2 or 3 kids, and she was. And all you can envision is the difficult life ahead. A boy, young woman. I mean, kind to me, gentle, accepting, and what can you say? But you love the lives of people, and you wish you could do something more. Just last night, I don't think it'll be in mind. I went to see. At the age of 80, one of the problems, the biggest problem of getting older is you begin to lose your friends. So you can transmit more fragile. And, I'm sorry?
Nothing, I'm talking.
I went to see a reporter that I consider the instrumental person in the work that I did on crack cocaine, Cocaine 2, Cocaine Blue, the later book. He was out in the streets for Life magazine with me. Just the best reporter I've ever seen, in the sense that he was not only had a great memory, great personality, but he lacked judgment in the sense that he wasn't judgmental. He knew good person and bad person, but his job was to get to know people, to reveal who they are as best you can. He was a fabulous reporter. He's very, very, very troubling. But these are the people we met. This poor woman behind, a young woman who had great beauty because of the name Crack Annie. They call her that because of her terrible addiction. These were kids. I mean, these were little kids who would sell themselves for a few dollars. It was, and they were, again, I'm going to go on and on about saying how nice people. This is a place need to get off the street, they welcomed into their house because sometimes it was difficult to be wandering the streets. This is individual housing project. Um, we welcome them. There's always a balance between your pain that you feel for somebody and telling the truth. And the stories we were trying to tell then uh, was about not about the nature of addiction, because American addiction, I think, is like 85% Caucasian users, but about the neighborhoods that are most devastated by drug use, the poor neighborhoods. And back then, it was housing projects in North Philadelphia. And I finally worked on by myself, went off to the Gulf in East New York. Um, this is in East New York. This is a 24-year-old woman who was working on the streets named Donna, who later is told, I believe, was murdered as far as I can tell because I tried to find her. Um, and I mean, it sounds so sentimental, so pardon me if I'm being sentimental, but Donna would give me, she would like read letters to God. I think anybody who's had addiction problems understand the letter she wrote. She said, "Would you please relieve me from this addiction? I wouldn't have to live this life." And she had a child, but no, she wasn't relieved from that addiction. This is North Philadelphia, and being thrown down by a car. Now, pictures are complex. If I was going to write about this guy, I would say what was being done with him was wrong. And then on the other hand, Sergeant Rice was what I thought was a good cop, the best cop that can be, but a rough guy when he had to be. So I don't just want to write about the complexities of so arrest. They're not all simple, but this does point to the abuse that we've seen in recent years by police of suspects. And I put this in here because Janine's beauty. We're always afraid on Instagram we were going to get, we didn't get hit by the nipple police. It's always strange to me that the photographs of great violence, you go on your reels and your phone, they have car accidents, they have this, they come. But if you see a child with a penis, if you see one with a nipple, and that somehow bothers people more. But you know, um, and but I put this picture in because I found it. I don't know how I lost it, but I found it, and it speaks to the fact that it's very hard to photograph people you love because they're aware of you maybe more. And it's like every picture when you're doing the work that I do my best to get to know people and withdraw. And there's a chance and point where I withdrew and she was pretty sleepy and she was away from me. Uh, an expression of very settled in because she had maybe soon. Travels in Africa. Each one could deserve a story. I know about this one because I remember it was one of those. I thought I was hallucinating. I was photographing in Nigeria, and I was photographing around this pond, watching these women clean pots, and they were chuckling and laughing. We were having a good laugh. And I looked up, and there they were, and I swear they came up from out of that water like spirits. I wrote about that. That one of the beliefs in that area is that if you die at a very young age, then you come back later as a full-born human and out of the spirit world.
That's Nigeria.
Nigeria. This is Jim and Serena. I think you've seen probably a couple of pictures of Jim and Serena in this book. There could be many. I can do a little book on Jim and Serena. We were desperate. We got a job from Life magazine. Or I made a suggestion we do family for Life magazine, a series of family. They said we want the birth first, and we had a hell of a time finding the birth because of hospital restrictions, the problems that people could have. Finally, we got a call from a couple down in Washington, not realizing they would drop dead beautiful. She was a new immigrant in the sense, Italian girl, incredible, beauty and incredible intelligence and incredible emotion. And she was worried about transference from a girl to womanhood. We got real close over that because she said she couldn't talk to her husband necessarily about this, but she was very worried about it. And so we were there through the whole birth. It was just extraordinary. Um, not never negating the terrible pain that a woman goes through. And here's the case in point where I can't imagine the pain that a person is going through. And the question is, because I can't imagine it, because I'm not going to give birth, can I possibly tell the story of birth? Question people ask themselves. I'm not sure that I can, but I can do the best that I can. It's really not the whole story. I would have to be inside her head to be able to tell the other point of view. The doctor standing over her, the great pain, the sterility of the setting when you're giving birth, but do the best you can. There's a church down in North Carolina. The girl giving me a look. I Now, how did I miss this picture? Don't ask me. I did another picture of the story I did on this family, but I missed this one. I think perhaps I was avoiding her glance. I was trying to do something that where she wasn't as obviously connected to me, not realizing at the time that it mimics in some ways Dr. King's expression. Uh, um, when I look at this picture, I only hope that she lived a better life than many of the people who came before her. Little Sam, big muscular son, back in. We like to point out that, and I did in my text, that Sam was a very anxious child, and what he loved was his bath. He still does. He'll put soap suds in there if he can, and spend a lot of time if he can in the bathtub because it gives him kind of peace. So here he is playing with his letters. Again, you try to wait for that moment where the person is in their own world. Sam was blessed with a dog named Tom, which I don't have a picture of. He also loved baths. So the two would get in the tub together, filthy bathtub, but they loved the mutual bath. Let's see. I don't think we have any more messages. Okay, good. How to shift gears? I think that's what people don't understand. A lot of people think that this is the life that I choose. Back then, I was a working photographer. And if people sent me somewhere, I would go there. I think maybe the difference between myself and other people, if I go someplace, I recognize that it takes a little bit of time. Most of the time, magazines don't take that time. You have to stay on. For what I do, I'm not a good hit and grab photographer. I'm not a good long length photographer. I'm not good for photographing across the street. I'm just not that kind of person. I'm better if I can get to know you. In this case, I met this young woman who was a gang member. This is a street gang in Kansas City. And we got to talking, and she told me a little bit about her very difficult life. As such, she was my entree into this community, to this gang, kind of my protector, though people just knew that we liked each other, so I was allowed in. As such, you have to make these decisions of, now that I've got such intimacy, I can stay longer and do all the things if I wanted to, but you have to find out what's really appropriate. This is in Niger. This is one of those times that are horrifying. Let it give you nightmares because this is when you feel photographer totally inept and inadequate because this little baby had AIDS. We didn't know that. The nurse I was traveling with doing a story on health conditions in the village assumed the baby had AIDS, which means 15 year mom had AIDS. Her husband probably had AIDS at the beginning of massive disease in the village. And you end up leaving, and you can make a donation. You said you leave money with people. You have to be very careful that you don't get jealousies. So you try to, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, it makes you feel better maybe than not, like that doesn't solve anybody's problems. So um, let's see, from my understanding, this book is made up of images that were previously unpublished or overlooked. Are there any projects or book concepts that you have never shared any images from before at all? Yes, actually. Well, um, God, yeah. I'll see what I can figure out. I got like a drawer full of 8 or 10 projects. Then I make these little book dummies, and they're not going to go any farther than that. Right now, this is Luke. The book that's on my mind, which I don't know if it's gonna happen now, was many years ago. I started collecting when I was Magnum. I started collecting, and I like to go back in it because it was a book about war, contemporary war. It was photographs of war with the numbers of casualties over the century, with the photographs of that. It was kind of a plain, blunt book, which I wrote some text for. Um, but it was just an expression of anguish, the violences of our century. Um, some people who saw the book, I think, said it was rather naive because it's very blunt. And now I'm finding it less naive because I find out now when it is determination of what's a war crime. We're discussing that it's a war crime, correct? And uh, the war crimes proliferated as years go by. Iraq was a war crime. Were there any hearings to put George W. Bush away? No. Should he be that a war crime? Should he be put away? Yes, along with Dick Cheney. Um, uh, you know, Henry Kissinger died. You know, like I should say, it's a tragedy, but this is the perpetrator of the William bombing, which ended up resulting in Bush coming to power and millions of deaths. Should he be applauded? She to me was. So it's a complicated business now. I'm floating away, but that's where my mind. That's the way it goes. But that's a big project that I may struggle back to, but again, it would hardly have to be self-funded. I was working for Mental Disability Rights International in Paraguay. I came across this young man who was, we didn't believe it. We heard mythology about kids being imprisoned for years and years in these cells in the psychiatric hospital in Paraguay, and walked around the corner and there he was. Whoa. He was well clothes in the cell, um, got his food through the bars and then for an hour a day. And was incredibly needy. The run ahead without taking too much. Later, because of the studies that people did from MDRI, he was released. They determined him as being very severely autistic. But all the years in prison, he never learned to speak because no one spoke to him much. If you approached him like I did, he grabbed you, which is very frightening because he was very strong. Um, it turned out he was desperate for any kind of physical attention. But wherever he is now, he's leading a much better life. And sometimes just take stories, like the story assignment from Time magazine. This is like when I worked in the emergency room. I went to the emergency room to do a book called The Knife and Gun many years ago. The emergency room was the last place I wanted to go to, very last one, because I had just lost Dorothea to cancer in hospitals. Was angry about hospitals. I didn't want to go back to hospital. So when you get an assignment to do the oh, Jesus, I can't do this. And then you go and you meet the families involved. The hardest thing to do is to get away from the image of the person singularly, look at the complexities of life. Of course, this very feisty lady, but I couldn't figure out whether the granddaughter was play acting, trying to deal with her own sense of loss. Uh, she was running around with this mask on. And who knows what was in her own head, being in the world of Um, and then you meet people who, I've met heroes in my life. This is one of them. Um, this guy was a oncologist who knew about his own demise and planned it, spent his last days reading um, religious readings and poetry, and without going into detail, he asked me if I wanted to stay with him. I think he wanted to have somebody who was not connected to the family, a new kind of personality in his life to help him a little bit, and I did. And he said he wanted me to be there, and I said, so people say, "How did this happen?" Well, I was sleeping there, and I was going to the middle of the night, and passing. Um, how do you feel? People say, "How do you feel?" I felt angry, um, upset. I went outside. And you have to be careful that you're not over dramatizing your own feelings. That you're is the thing that's really happening is loss. It has nothing to do with you. Who gives a fuck about the crowd? What's important is the beautiful person who's passed. This is uh, it's like Jesus is a project. In a sense, it's ironic because one of the projects that I did with Dorothy was about her breast cancer. That was Dorothea's project because she was the one who wanted me to photograph her because she couldn't. The hospitals wouldn't let me in to photograph other women. So she became the pivotal moment. In Janine's case, when 9/11 happened, I was doing a story on mental disability in Europe, came home, and one of the few times I think I came apart, I arrived home, I got assignments. So people wanted to say, why don't you go down alive? And I said, I'm going down there. Um, the reason I didn't is I knew and it came to pass. I'm not a great seer. I knew that this incredibly bad tragedy. It's a little like, not unlike what's happening in Gaza right now. This great tragedy, this loss of life, was going to grow into something much more monstrous, if that's possible. Um, it did happen, but this became the excuse for Afghanistan, certainly for Iraq, all the falsity of both wars. Um, but Janine said, we got to pull, this is history. So we went down together and began wandering aftermath. We didn't have any access to ground zero um, without press passes, and also they were selling access to ground zero back then and to meeting people, and you were chosen to be a certain kind of person. This is a from a rooftop. I got to give a call out to Healthy. One of the daughter, Jason Escanarzi, actually told me about this rooftop. Though he didn't photograph much from it, I ended up um, getting this lousy lens that nobody wanted from Canon. It was like, you know, it was a 500 millimeter bent lens. And set it up, and you could look down through the A's into ground zero. And what you could see is you could see the firemen down there just depressed because they couldn't find any survivors. Um, one picture I had is one alone, but this picture you can see two firemen going through the flaming rubble, and you can also see the smoke that we begin to know is increasingly toxic. Back to another story in Mexico of um, mental disability. It's a terrible picture of a little boy who has no legs but is still afraid. I guess he's going to fall on the floor. A man who was for hearing voices down in Arkansas on the 4th of July. They were setting off rockets. I love the little baby on the left here. Thought the rocket was the coolest thing. I was doing another health-related project and ended up in Ethiopia for a brief time in the Tigray region, which was later ravaged by warfare. Um, and just photographing a person, washing down their camel by the stream. This is a man in Dallas, Queens, first full facial transplant in America. After working painting a church down in Texas, and he his brushed against the high tension wire and brushed away his features basically. And they replaced his face with another man, an older man than he was, um, but he was blind. His eyes are removable. And he put him in because people couldn't stand seeing him without his eyes. Um, you know, but he was blind. We ended up going to his wedding, married later on to a burn victim, ironically. And this is Janine smiling over here. This is the awesome Robert Frank in his elderly years. I don't pretend people, be very careful what a friend is. I like to think of him as a friend. I knew him, Robert, for 40 years. And I guess in a few minutes I'll tell you how I met him. And then I didn't see him for years and years and years. But there's a lot of involved and oblique, abstract, etc. I met him. I did a book a lifetime ago in 1978 called Verses a Days. Robert Frank actually picked it up in Cambridge somewhere, and someone called me and said that Frank had your book. Of course, I ran over to see him. I could never talk to him. I was very, very, I don't mean to be sure, I was mortified that Robert Frank had my book. People pushed us together, with dinner together, and I said, I can't. I didn't lie to him. I had no money. And a lot of the times today, no matter how wealthy you are, nobody has any money. But honestly, we had no money. Young man, he said, "What are you doing later?" And I said, "I'm going home." And he said, "I'll come there." He came home. Dorothy was there. We couldn't feed him because we had nothing in the refrigerator, so we had a big gallon of ice cream. And I always remember sitting around with a spoon and eating ice cream out of his bucket. But the idea that this man, it never occurred to me how generous it is to take the time to come and see me. And then for years I saw him but didn't see him because so many people were lining up to watch this iconic man. So I was blessed to know him towards the end of his life, where my family, my wife and Sam got to know him too, and he was more than a character, funny, whimsical, not the man that I read about. And this is the last picture in the Brief Life book. It was made in Arkansas. I'm writing a story about this particular family. This is a picture at the end of the story, and I'll show you later what I'm doing right now. But this is a particular series about some kids that I met while running in and out of an abandoned house. What happened is I happened upon an abandoned house in the town of Alexa, Arkansas, photographed in this looks like setting came outside, and two little boys asked for us to be photographed, and then at a certain point, um, followed after me, um, and basically said, "This is a girl said, would you give me a hug?" And of course, now this is only a couple of years ago. The whole motif of relationship with children and the children. And they got a picture of me now. I'm covered with dirt, sweaty. I'm a gaunt old guy.
Out of
Out of plate license car standing across the street, shiny camera. I was like, I was the curve of the week if you look at me. Um, so I was very cautious about kids and new kids and attach myself, hug me. And um, and there was that moment of what do you do with parents? And, the story kind of ends there. I finally did find the mom, but I said I can't photograph you because I got to give me a mom, but they were having nothing of it. So I included that story because very often life is about is about crossing lines and not knowing, but thinking you know people and not knowing them at all. not knowing the stories and learning as you go, sometimes the hard way. It's like we went to, you know, 9/11, the aftermath of 9/11, not realizing the pain of firemen and firemen being really vicious to you when they saw the camera and hit at you and then realize they were wrong. But you never know. You don't know what's going on in the minds of these subjects, and it's worth studying and worth being careful. It's a worthwhile life. What I'm doing right now, um, and believe it or not, this is the project I was doing before Sam counseled me before I went to the cemetery. I before COVID, I was collecting stories uh, that never were published as stories, little pieces, and I realized I had to write the experience. Picture, if you let this picture go, it might be. Uh, I would think it would be seen as the shadow of the past in a sense, and in part it is. It's on the field. In my mind, I can almost see people bent over picking cotton, in the fields, the past, and this little boy encountering. Um, but I needed to write to this, so I wrote a story. I don't more. It's the name of the book when it ever happens. It's a self-published book called "I Know You." Um, the title comes from actually meeting Robert Frank later in life when his memory was gone and he wasn't sure if he knew me because he knew me. I love this. He knew me as the young Eugene. He knew me as the old Eugene. And once he realized that the young Eugene and the old Eugene were the same Eugene, um, he knew me again. And that's the intro of the beginning. That's where the title, Do I Know You? Um, and these are series with Robert, the time that I photographed him. Uh,
10 years ago.
10 years ago, from the time of that conversation. Um, it's the same thing that happened. We go in there, very self-conscious. He actually took my picture with a Instagram, little Instagram camera. I was kind of mortified to take it and waiting till we went to another place till he relaxed. A picture that I did for this new book about this young woman. How to describe this? I won't go into details. I met the man behind me who brought me over to see this family. Incredible guy who spent years in prison. We became close friends, and he wanted me to meet his family. I went to see the family, photographed the kids, and then the dad said he'd like to meet my daughter. She came out. I could see there was something slightly wrong with her gait, her posture, makes sense. But so I photographed her with the kids, and then the kids looked away, and she sat there, and she read my mind. It's really unnerving. She said to me, "So you want to photograph me?" She knew it. I didn't say so. I said, "Yes." And she says, "Why?" And you go. And then now I had to watch my language for the time we're living in right now because, as you know, this is a time where language, attitudes, everything are being judged and misjudged. Um, and I thought of every single thing that I could possibly say very quickly. What could I say to her? Then I said, but in my head I did. And I said, well, it sort of, I used the word term, it fell out. I said, because you're beautiful. And she said to me, yes, I am. And I made the picture of her. And, but again, and uh, when I was done and she was content and she walked away. And so that's another chapter. And then, I won't go into details. The man in Arkansas who raised up poor, since passed away. Another person I'm so glad I did his life story for this book, a bit of his life story. Grew up very tough, conquered his alcoholism. Um, it was a bigoted, bigoted upbringing, to say the least. Ended up living with the Sandra I mentioned before, who's a woman who takes care of real people. and they had a really loving relationship. Whether it was a physical one, I don't, but a loving relationship. Just like this guy was very, very upset about living in the same house with a gay man, and they all worked out. So it was a credible household to go into because there you had this former, you know, classic redneck, a very gay man, a very extraordinary black woman, all finding around in a house. And the last picture, this is just one of the stories I did. Oh yeah, Genie's going. I couldn't make up his name. I'm so sorry. His name is Dave Zero, and Dave was a tattoo artist. A very good one. He met his wife in Thailand, whether it was a purchase or not. And but he makes the point that they cherished older men than they do younger men, and whatever the relationship worked out with both. As I pointed out, she worked at that time in Heartbreakers, which is a strip club in Williston, North Dakota. I tell you, I went to the club. It was very difficult. I didn't photograph in the club. It was run by mobsters, we feel, from Florida, but they wouldn't let me photograph it. It was very, very hard to see this person you knew now as a person being mauled by these kind of angry, uh, drunk. Um, and the book goes on to deal with people. I'm afraid that other people are not going to want much to hear about, but they're part of my life as a Ku Klux Klan. Another people that you met down the road. They're American short stories, and that's the project I'm working on now. Okay, are there any other questions that you? I'm looking up here. Okay. Yeah, I wish I could speak to all of you instead of making up notes because it's easy to do that. So,
Was there anything you didn't cover in the notes that you were describing?
Well, answering my own questions. I mean, Janine's right. I got notes here. Do you pay people? No. Do you post people? Only like the beginning collaborate for. Are the pictures the truth? No. Nothing's momentary. Are they fiction? No. You can't say we fictions. Photographs can be feelings, like has been said before. They contain factual elements like this picture, the tattoos, the intimations of exploitation, the bareness of the women, the fact that when I described her, I said that uh, uh, she's beautiful but damaged, and you can see that in the picture. Um, do I feel that I'm, question taken out of space? I could very well be taking space for other people. All I want to know is if people are needing to replace us like that they too go out and maintain a curiosity about people, no matter what they are. It worries me very much um, to only be worried about yourself. I do feel that this is getting increasingly the selfie generation. Um, the portraits that are being done very often in magazines are meant to not necessarily describe who the person is, but describe who the photographer is and make you realize that, that they see very well. Do they tell you about the person? Not necessarily, but that's how I feel. I've got my own biases. So,
there are some questions now.
Oh, some questions.
Maybe.
Okay.
Comments.
Maud's trying to get from me as best I can what question I want to ask. At rip. I'm not at rip too. Don't don't take your time. How can you cope with all the human condition when you're constantly taking in involved? Where's the trick? Get sad to death. That's heavy and profound. Good question, Maud. God, the paradoxes they talk about can eat you alive. The paradox about trying to pick one reason and not realize it's never going to be seen, that you're taking people's time, not going to be seen. The only thing that keeps me going is that I always feel, and I hope I'm being correct, that the people that I photograph welcome the process. I know that people very much welcome telling their story, and I feel that that's my main benefit to my subject. On the other hand, I'm sometimes beset by the fact that photographs don't mean that they, I mean, they certainly don't have the power that you want. There's other medium today, whether it's film or whatever it is, that's seeing over that. I think the images may last for a while, but who knows how long that'll last. So, um, and how does it bother me? Um, I'm not a, I've never been, you don't want to get into your own psychology, but I've always been uh, a rather anxious person. I was talking to my writer friend last night who's getting close to passing away. They said, well, he's Irish. He might forget the good things, but he never forgets the grudge. And I'm one of those people too, personally. Don't forget my grudges. I do everything I can, but the person I can remember the person who turned me down. I can remember the person who insulted me, and some of the insults found and kept me going. I remember. I'll tell you, uh, there's been some great ones. My all-time one that rings in my head is when I had the pictures of Dorothea. There's I was trying to find a place to show that story about women's breast cancer before anything like that. Before, and I went over to Harvard to
Boston women.
no, it was Harvard University. Showed them to the curator over there, and she said to me, "They're disgusting." I remember that. They're disgusting. And you're gonna go, okay, and you leave, and then it eats at you because you wonder what the fuck's disgusting about them. Um, and and you let that grow out, and you realize it's so much of the world. It's the appearances of people are disgusting, not what they go through, not the inner turmoil. It's a world of appearance. You can get very frustrated. So I go up and down. I get um, the plus side destiny here, so I don't mean to, blow smoke, but is having a family. And early on, I had Dorothea, who probably suffered much more than Virginia did because my career was starting. No one wants the kind of photographs that I did. So you get frustrated and you know, you talk too much, you complain too much. And I still do on occasion, embarrass myself on my complaints. And then when I don't complain, if I go off on myself, can get into a funk. And then what I do, I know better. Knowing how to control my own sorrows about the world, let's get back to work. That sounds shallow, but it's the work that brings you up and the work that excites you. Even if it's not the right thing at that time, it's the work that keeps you going.
I wanted to mention, you said that you hadn't had an assignment in like years, but you did have an assignment this summer that was very unusual for you.
Oh.
In his car.
Well, Janine pointed out that I did have an assignment not that long ago. It was actually kind of amusing because I got an assignment from London to photograph what I thought was a garage band musician. the guy was offering us something, a day or two work, $1,000, which is a lot we needed at that time. So we said, sure, not realizing the photographing is a remarkable uh, uh, Vince Clark. We knew we were kind of run over his house. He had this gorgeous house, and he said, "Well, this is in the Bradford Museum." And Vince Clark was wonderful, but very quiet and photograph when we made most of the pictures. My son went with me. He was the one who started wandering around the room, and he came back to me. He says, "This ain't. This is Vince Clark," and he knew exactly who he was, and he was in awe of him. And since then, I've become in awe of him. So you get great surprises and great gifts, and Vince Clark was a great gift. And we have a person who said that we need to upgrade our audio equipment. It's probably me.
Oh, that's what I said. I responded. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Are you too low? Yeah.
We'll figure it out next time.
Maud says that she's French. Pick on Maud while you're kind of taking it careful on your questions. Thank you, Maud. That was a great question. I appreciate it. So where are we time-wise? I don't want to keep going on and,
It's 13.
Okay. If those who want to hang on, I'll go back and answer my own questions that I put out. I confess I am battling with the idea myself, am I the right person to be doing certain stories? And the answer is no, I'm not. I am simply not. I came out of a certain background. Uh, uh, there's all kinds of life experience I didn't have. But I don't know what the inspiration for this life is, but I do feel that each and every one of us should take a crack at trying to understand another person. I'll never understand entirely, but the way we're going, when we don't even make an effort to try to understand each other, is catastrophic. And it's what I think people want, what the politicians want, what you know Trump wants, etc. That division, that magic division. And there's been people who inspired me. Of course, the mom that I met Till, the little boy who was killed in Mississippi all those years ago, but theoretically flirting with a store clerk. There's questions whether that ever happened, but a number of men got together and butchered Emmett Clark. And his mama demanded that his casket be opened so people could see the body, see what was going on, and not hide it. And I think that's an inspiration to me. It doesn't do any good to hide it. I think there's a matters of taste where on battlefield pictures, there's matters of taste. On the other hand, to hide it. We tried all the time in America. They banned casket pictures for returning from Iraq. You cannot, or then you get these incredible pictures of Todd has this incredible picture of a casket being removed from the belly of an airplane and so forth. But people were, because we're trying to hide, we're trying to make it look like John Wayne roaring around, that our guys aren't being killed. But even those pictures that whole thing was a diversion because we lost quite a number of men and women in Iraq, but the Iraqis lost 1 million, 2 million people. And is that known? Probably not. It was more known in Vietnam, where the photographers had more access to travel and were able to catch. But even then, the photographers, with the exceptions of people like Don McCullough and Phillips John Griffiths, certainly in that incredible book, Vietnam Incorporated, talked about the profits of war. Even now, it's a terrible thing to be talking about the profits of war, but you have to realize the amount of money, the amount of profits that's going on even now with the current conflicts and that are going on even in Gaza, billions of dollars in the arm industry and I'm not going to say that's the reason for this, but certainly every war is profitable to somebody, not to the people who suffer through it, but for big business and warmongers and politicians. And so uh, you were an outsider. That's absolutely true. I'm answering my own question. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with being an outsider because I'm not, but I am an outsider with curiosity, and I've got years, and I don't know the best way to meet somebody is to listen to them and shut your mouth. That's what I tell everybody. You shut your mouth. Um, you know, let people talk. Let them talk at their own pace. Get an idea of where they're coming from. Um, you know, uh, I found inspiration to start with going to an AA meeting. Uh, with a member of my family, and there people know enough that you shut your mouth. Um, let people tell their story because they have to. Ultimately, it's part of the healing process is to unload the feelings and stress that you have. Um, so that's part of the process of that I work on. I guess, sense by your work, you have this hypersensitive to reading questions. Maud's coming back, and I can
Hi,
tell.
Maud.
Maud's French. She has these beautiful questions. Love you, Maud. Thank you. And I can tell it's really hard to let it go to reach humans and animals. I mean, it's hard because it's at the same time when you connect with photography to many hearts and needs, so many broken persons. At the same time, it can be so hard. It can destroy our heart. Thank you for your moment. I do think having a good family helps, and you have one. So am I. Thank you very much, Maud. Um, I think that I'm not encouraging uh, people like a lot of the hard. I got to tell you, a lot of the difficult things that I've uh, seen in life, I didn't mean to see. They were assignment work. I had no idea that this is going to be very difficult. But you learn to cope with it. But the greatest joys I've had in photography, we could all do, is go into people's families and photograph their relationship with kids. And there's such incredible poignancy and pain and love and those kind of pictures that it's something we should do, that you can do. So there's nothing uh, exemplary for having difficult things. Um, even in this book that I put out here, I think you can see some of the photographs of beauty and family, and maybe more important, the way we come to this life and live this life. Um, so thank you, Maud. Do you pay people? No, I think. Now, when I say that, I should qualify it, and I'll probably get into trouble here because I'm like some sort of pompous ass. You don't do anything this bad. Now, there's been times like,
Did you put this down? Because maybe
yeah,
the audio is
maybe
getting blocked.
I can get closer.
Yeah.
You know, um, is my better now? I'm closer to the, but I've done Audacity once. I gave $5 for a woman to go into, and I got chided on it, but go into a house where the man was selling armaments, and he came out in the street. I photographed him in North Philadelphia. I to get into a crack house. They ask you at the door if once you're inside, they don't care what happens to you. So I didn't pay anybody. Yes, I think that I remember uh, photographers. One man that I know, I think his name is Manny,
Yeah.
who someone bought a radio that turned out to be a hot radio. Someone bought a radio from him, and he was fired from his job. And I think that people don't understand the massive complexities of. Now, do I give anybody any money to pose in pictures? No, never, because that would give you a different relationship with it. It will be performing for you, and that's uh, it's detrimental in every single way. It ends the relationship, it forms it up. Have I brought food? When I was in East New York, the refrigerator would be empty, and I would come over and bring in some food, simply to have something to eat. Is that paying somebody? Someone could turn back and say, yes, it is, or um, it gives, have syringes available, which back then I had a friend made some available to give syringes to people that needed needles. That was a crime, I guess. It isn't anymore. Um, but there's those kind of crossing the line. To pay for people, no. You know, let's go on to my own. To get releases, when I can. Before we got releases, a lot of people when they did the cocaine book, most everybody. Um, I'll tell you, thinking about Ed Barnes, that wonderful reporter. I remember one moment we had to get a release from Duma, the gang, the Red Hood Housing Project. Duma, 290-pound guy with wear all white clothes and machine guns in the trunk. Um, we asked him for release until we realized Duma couldn't read, and what we were asking him was an insult. So, um, how can you possibly look at what you look at? Uh, there's that mark that everybody mentions when you have a camera, but I think the bottom line is it's not that. Is photography is my job. I'm not, you know, that sounds not so romantic, but it is my job. It's my job to try to tell the truth the best I can with all the ramifications of, truth, the way I see things, the way I visually see things, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm still trying to tell the truth.
It's kind of like
You know,
ER doctors, though, you know?
Like
somebody comes in with, like, you can't control what somebody is in, like a horrific accident, or where they come in, how to deal with it. You said it's like your job. It's their job, too.
Well, yeah, right. And Jenny, I didn't catch Janine's connection. There are a lot of people who have work. All of us have work. Um, my son's at work as a personal trainer, and he loves his work until the person comes in who's a master pain in the ass. And what do? You still work with that person. Are you simply out of date? Yes, probably. Someone asked me, what do you what are you going to leave behind, or something like that? And I know a bit enough about that. There are a handful of photographers. Most photographers who are remembered are people who end up in the museums, who are considered artists. Art photography will last. Um, goes into the collections, has a financial value to it. It's collectible, it's swappable, it's saleable. Right now, photojournalism, with very few exceptions, is none of the above. So you'll end up in technique books, occasional history books, will last, not in any real sense, despite how much you would like it to be. In my case, I'm very proud of the audience that I have. Very often is working with people who want to do this kind of work. But in terms of what it takes to last, I think you look at the careers of artists that we think about. Some of them are, of course, beyond brilliant. We're not talking about all the geniuses of the world, but a whole lot of people who are becoming famous today are famous because of the nature of the person that they are, because of where they fit into contemporary life, because they know the right people, because they were somehow labeled art. That's what left. So do I see myself in long term? I'm not feeling bad about it. That's just the way it is. I grew up in a world great newspaper I was watching them, and they end up in the files, And I see great newspaper photographers now, you know. You saw one of the New York Times today by Todd Heisler, man in the building, a subway track running by. It's a wonderful picture. I see people who's also a great guy, by the way. Mark Peters, another guy who she's going to last maybe because he fought her as a politician. Stories about politicians. And Mark's a cool guy. Really like him. Really always a nice man. And Howie the Hell makes pictures all the time of politicians. I don't know what kind of drugs he's on, but I'd have to do something. But he and I'm very proud of him to be able to do so. So, in my own date, most probably, the street photographer is going the way of the poet, the social photographer going the way of the poet.
Are the cemetery pictures in a book?
Yeah, the cemetery pictures in a book. Astoundingly, very soon. It's going to print soon, if you can believe that. It's being published by DAP. It'll be coming out in March or April. Again, I got to tell you, it was just the cemetery pictures. To me, that was just the most wonderful experience of wandering all kinds of weather. The more inclement the weather, the better I like it. Maybe it's the Irish in me that rains is glorious. But it's all the text in there. I found out that the epitaphs that are on the gravestones are like poetry, so I collected those. And then I felt uncomfortable separating myself from the people who were buried there. Like there's 560,000 people buried there. But on the other hand, I wanted to know who they were and wanted to say, well, I know what this mortality thing is. So I included 6 or 7 vignettes stories about mortality from uh, dealing with my father's own mortality through what it was like uh, to lose Dorothy. My favorite remark, Janine said to me, I think Janine said to me, I sound like what do you call it? People who watch, what do you call it? Person who watches women all the time going by. I think I, after I lost Dorothy, I would stop on a street corner whenever I saw her and it looked like her stalker and watch her go by. And I could be mistaken for stalker, but it's the kind of way you have to deal with your grief. And the book ends up actually in a vignette that I had. There's one woman who was a slave buried in Greenwood Cemetery. And years ago, when we were in West Virginia, I was brought out to see the slave raised on a plantation by a woman who grew up on this plantation. Um, and the place there, all the slave graves had no markings on them. They weren't allowed to put names on them, drawings on them, anything else. So the loved ones would sometimes gouge the stones, apparently, or you can see the cut marks, trying to memorialize their loved ones in some way. And it would be just a block with no names allowed. So there's a few stories in there. And Diane Sue. And trying to think if there's anything else for you. I don't want to. The last question, I guess, there's nothing for me to say. It's not a bad thing to leave with. I get is photography, photojournalism look valid today. I feel that it's not popular today. The people who function as photojournalists are probably going to have a hard time today. Probably going to have to work other jobs unless they have some family money or something. And the ways of getting out are getting tougher and tougher. Both because of the new media, there's going to be new ways of getting the work out. I think of projecting the slideshows. I don't like the Instagram popularity contest business. I think that's really disconcerting and unfortunate. But on the other hand, you can get your stories out. And there's something thing about going to the movies, which I love and grew up loving, for me influenced me more than anything else, is the movies in front of you. We see it last night. It influences you and it's gone. But the photojournalism, the pictures, once published, something you can keep going back on. And I go back once in a while to the books that I really care about, the people that I care about, and look at them and see what it is that drew me all these years, and it's all that sense of wonder. People criticize Cartier-Bresson. I read a piece recently about the white male gaze, about And then I said, shit, let me take a look at Cardi Baton, the white days. And there he is, this man. I don't care where he came from. He was he was a prisoner of war. He traveled the world, and I don't see anything in there about a judgmental gaze. Just be a curious man who brought us all kinds of cultures. Um, and the books that I've looked at, that I look, you know, do I see that gaze? That's why I love Robert Frank. His ability to go from his family um, to the street, the crass sense of humor. When it ran, well, Helen Levitt. Who the hell can photograph kids like Helen Levitt? I mean, they always try to make them sentimental. She catches these kids in their spontaneity. You know, Kodelko's Gypsies book, Jules Perez's Tele, Chin-Chi's book on the gang, the Wire the Chain, excuse me, all year together, Larry Towles and the Mennonites. And they go back to those and every one of them. And I can go back to them. And that's what I meant. I might not see any of these books in years when I go back to them and I learn something else. There's a lot of people like that. Hot Light book, you know, um, you know, you go back and each time I learn something. So maybe there is. I think we're going to be slowly boxed into the role of poets, which is not such a bad place to be. But we're not going to have that great expansive audience that we had before, unless I'm totally. But that's okay because if I always have an audience like this, we have to go on and share something. Um, let's do it. And for those that out here supported the book, um, I can't tell you what it means to us because it made it possible and it keeps you going. And I'll keep trying the best that I can. And